Michelle, welcome to the Space Plus podcast. How are you doing?
Thank you for inviting me. I'm fine, thank you. I've had a lovely Sunday, a chill and lovely Sunday, and I hope you've had a lovely day as well.
Yeah,
Or
my
morning.
day. Yeah,
Yeah.
my morning is just starting. It's at let me see, it's like 9:42 a.m. right now. Normally, I'm usually like probably getting up right now or like at 10 a.m. Yesterday when I had to film the podcast at 7 a.m., I wondered like why did I put myself in such a position, you know? Because most of the time if I'm up at 7 a.m. it's because I haven't gone to bed. I was like, okay, I have to get up by 7 a.m. I woke up at 6:58 and I texted you like, oh my god, I think I'll be late. But yeah, here
Yeah.
we are.
I think this timing works really well for me
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you.
it does. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I'm
so
wondering, like you said, you had a lovely day, like a lovely Sunday. How was the day like? Like, what is the loveliness that you're talking about?
what was lovely about my day?
Yeah.
I think I spent the morning. I made breakfast, really hearty breakfast. Breakfast is my favorite meal of the day. So if I eat really well, then I feel
Ooh,
really
okay.
nice. And I was seeing off my friend's dad today. He's a captain and he works in Kinshasa in Congo. So he was leaving for work after a lovely 2 weeks of him being around and spending time with us because his daughter is a student pilot as well. Like she went to St. Bridget's as well. Yeah, yeah.
Ooh, okay.
So, yeah. So he was leaving today, so we had an early morning seeing him off to the airport. Then came, took a bit of a nap, had breakfast, and then I spent most of my noontime reflecting on a lot of things, just like journaling and putting a lot of my thoughts down and reflecting and analyzing how they're going to be impacting some critical decisions that I need to be making the next couple of days. So it's kind of like exciting responsibility. Yeah, but that's how my Sunday has been. And then I got ready for the podcast as well. That was quite fun, dressing up and whatever. And yeah, so that's been my day so far. Yeah.
Okay, lovely. So I'm going to ask you the big question. What's your definition of quality education?
My definition of quality education is a learning experience that prepares you for lifelong learning. You learn the importance of impact, understanding how what you're learning will create an impact to the people around you or the lives that you will be encountering on your day to day. So I feel like quality education is centered around that impact, solution oriented thinking, and developing skills for you to become a lifelong learner. So it's not just about, okay, I'm done with my degree, but no, understanding that even when you go to the workspace, you're going to be consuming information and needing to work through that space.
All right, and how do you approach the solution-driven aspect and like the making of impact? Is that something that we teach, like say in the Kenyan education system, and we're teaching people like say biochem, physics, and stuff? How do we approach, you know, solution-based learning? Do we have to like say it a priori, like, okay, this is what you're supposed to do, this is how you're supposed to change the world, or should that be inferred from electromagnetism in physics, for example?
um, I think how to incorporate it in our day to day is through integrating social life with the classroom learning as well. So see how you guys can study something and then there's the practical part where maybe you guys go to an export farm in Nanyuki and you see what the agricultural information that you guys were taking during class is used and applied to day to day, or how you as a person can play a role in making it better. Do you get what I mean? Or for example, if you did law or you did history, one of the two, and you guys get to discuss visas, visa requirements, visa applications, challenges that Kenyans face, and you get to understand immigration law from the perspective of, okay, if me as a law student, I want to understand policies in order to make visas more accessible to Kenyans, then these are the challenges that are being faced today, and these are different forms of technology that I feel could help improve that process for us. So I feel like it's more of teaching the theory, and then so I feel like in terms of becoming a solution oriented thinker, then and creating impact, then that really goes a long way.
In high school, we were talking about Christian religious education, right? We learned Christian religious education. And I think, I was reflecting on the Kenyan system. And I feel like the Kenyan system, the people who formulated, for example, like the 844 system, they had a very good like framework in which they wanted it to work. I feel like they had a very good vision. Maybe in terms of
Yeah,
execution, it didn't like work out so well because again of resources and like funding and stuff like that. Because like in CRE, for example, we used to have this part where we'd answer like application questions, so they like
yeah,
make you think about it and how it
yeah,
relates to the real world. But the problem was that the questions, like the answers that you had to give, were supposed to be based off of the marking scheme, and you didn't
yeah,
really have to like apply your knowledge or like
yeah,
think in the
yeah.
real world. So how do we approach that? Because I feel like now I mean, they had good intentions. They were like trying to make it so that like we now infer it in the real world and they connected to what we're learning. But again,
Mhm.
the marking scheme was limiting because we only had to answer what is based on the marking scheme.
It wasn't you internalizing your life experiences and being able to express them in your exams or in your papers or to answer the application questions, but more of you looking at the textbook and seeing what they say, what they've said. And I'm sure the answers that I answered are the answers that are still being put on paper today, even though it's been like 5 years since I was in high school, despite the fact that a lot has happened in society today. And a lot of those answers are very they fit ideal situations. I think that's the thing, because I feel like sometimes the 844 system teaches us in an ideal format and not in the sense where there's so many factors to be considered. And so in that sense, it's like isolated, it's an isolated learning experience, and then you come outside and then you realize that, okay, as much as the 1 plus 1 equals 2, when there's certain factors taking place, 1 plus 1 might not equal. Do you get what I mean? Yeah. So one of the ways that I feel like education, the academic education system here in Kenya can be improved is if it creates more room for self-expression and encouraging students to bring their lived experience to the classroom, and it not just being a space where we go to take in information, but a space where we are encouraged to express ourselves. Because I remember when I was doing my uni applications after high school and I was writing essays, I never really wrote about myself throughout high school. It was mostly the set books that we did, and formal writing like letters and application, letter letter of recommendation, like minutes, that type of stuff. We never really learned to write about ourselves, about the things that we love, about like self expression was not really something that was prioritized in the classroom, and I think that's primarily what's lacking in the 844 system, or that's one thing that I feel like I really lacked through my high school. And so it was something that I cultivated through my uni experience. And so yeah, I feel like it's something that's also very important because after high school you need to decide what you want to do career wise. You're going to be interacting with the workspace, and there's been a huge shift in employment these days because it's not a company saying, okay, we want to hire you. Okay, at least this is what it was like in Hungary. It wasn't, okay, we have an open role, you guys just submit your CVs and it's that. But it was more of, what's your personality? How do you solve problems? And how well does your whole you as a whole, not just academics, not just being an A student or whatever, but like how do you put that, what you learn in practice, like how do you internalize problems and generate solutions, and how does that fit into our values as a company and how we provide service to our customers. So it's more of, so self-expression becomes very important because that's the gap, that that's the skill that bridges the gap between the skills and qualities that you have and what the company seeks in an employee. Do you get what I mean? That's why I feel like it's really important. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting because like we went for site visits in New York when I was in spring break, and
Mhm.
because resumes, I feel like they're very similar, they're very homogeneous. Like they have the same thing. Oh, we had like bodily word, and
Yeah.
Americans had National Honor Society and stuff like that. And then the only thing that the person talked about, like the only thing that can set you apart is your personality in your skills and interests. What does someone express in
Yeah.
their interests? And I feel like
Yeah.
they talked about someone who like they connected with because they I guess they loved cheese or something, and like the
Mhm.
recruiter loved cheese, and that's how they connected. And that's like something that made them seem human, like they're not robotic. They don't just
Yeah,
do engineering for humanity, some club here in well,
yeah,
I
yeah,
think that's
yeah.
the motto of Columbia engineering. There's a club here, and like they just don't focus on mechanical stuff you know
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but back to the thing on Yale Young African Scholars. You said that you had now that experience of self-expression from Yale Young African Scholars. How was your experience in Yale Young African Scholars?
I had a great time. I had a great time, and the most important lesson or the most important thing that I learned from that experience was it was the stepping stone that helped me like map out how to actually study abroad, because I knew I wanted to study abroad, but I didn't know what resources are available, how do you start, like what are these universities looking for in students, and all of that. So during the retreat that we had, it focused on that. And also during my time there, I got to really understand that I would prefer a diverse learning environment, because we had people from Cape Verde, South Africa, Zimbabwe, all of that. And it was fun because all my life, like I've been around in the classroom setting, we've mostly been Kenyans. And so being in a learning environment where you're all from very different backgrounds, and so you each have an interesting perspective that you bring to the table, and you see how your environments actually influence how you perceive things. And it's just amazing, because now the classroom, it's more exciting to have discussions, and we all get to feel engaged because we have something to say, and we know that what we have to say is most likely going to be different from somebody else's perspective. So it taught me the importance of diversity in the classroom, and I think that's why I was now sure that for my uni, I would really like to be in a uni abroad and have that that and it was like a simulation of a diverse community, and I was like, okay, I feel like I would love to be in such a community. And it also, tying back to the self-expression thing and the hobby thing that you talked about, it taught me the importance of creating an identity outside my academics. Because when we went for the Yale Young African Scholars program, we were all smart. Like, we were all good students in school. Like, we were all, but as soon as we got there, that didn't really matter. You get, we had to do like fun things. We had like cultural day where we had to present. We had like game nights. We had movie nights. You get, and so it encouraged us to reflect on our identity and our hobbies and interests outside the classroom, because that was the basis with which we formed connections with one another. And I'm still friends with my friends still today, and I see how all of them are doing like incredible things all around the world. And it also, one of the most important things, even in the essays in our applications, was impact. When we're thinking of impact, it doesn't have to be like the biggest of things. It could be just something. Let's say you live in an estate and you decide to create something that you guys can do together to foster community and create space for having conversations about like life or politics or even economics, or you know what I mean. That in itself is an impact, because you've brought people together for social good. Get what I mean? So I think that was a very important lesson, because we had to think of social impact projects that we could do in our communities, and how me as a person with the education that I've achieved so far, I can apply that and make life a bit easier for the person next to me.
You've talked about like impact and how like sometimes we think impact is like this big thing. And right now I'm taking this like common course here. It's called university writing. And my professor was talking about how like when you write the essays, you might think that you have to write this huge policy paper, but you only
Mhm.
have to like make an observation and try to synthesize the information with maybe the text that you're analyzing or your object of analysis. I was talking to
Yeah.
someone who was also in St. Regis yesterday, and we were
Mhm.
talking about how like impact can involve just like changing the lives of two people. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be like in the macro scale where you have to like find a vaccine for something.
Yeah.
You just have to change the life of two people, and that is impact. And Now let's go to your experience in uni. You talked about how your experience in aviation, and it said before we started recording how aviation in Kenya is not the same as the aviation experience you had in
In
Europe.
how
Yeah, in
virtual.
Hungary. So I'm wondering, like, what does that look like? What are the perks of both sides? When you went to like University of Dublin, what was that like? And what did you get from there that you wouldn't have gotten here in Kenya? And what is it that maybe someone who's doing aviation in Kenya can get that they cannot get in Europe or studying anywhere else in the world?
I think I'll talk about how my experience in UniDep was, and then after that, like I'm gonna have points to now give as a reference for what I did there and how different it would have been if I studied here in in Nairobi, for example. Yeah. So, my experience in UNIDEP was interesting because I was finding myself. It wasn't like something that I was deeply passionate about, like piloting particularly. I always thought I wanted to do aeronautical engineering or aviation engineering. But then I enrolled in uni here in Kenya for aeronautical engineering at the Technical University of Kenya. But I only went through one semester, and I was like, this is not really what I thought it was. And which actually circles back to our 844 system. I feel like I wished that they did a lot more to help us understand the various professions that are available and help us reflect on what a career what you need to consider when you think of a career path, because aeronautical engineering was good, but it just wasn't my personality, to be specific, because I love excitement, I love adrenaline, I want to have a different day every day. I'm not a routine type of person because I feel like engineering requires some level of routine, and for you to be able to, you know especially if you're going to be working on the office and design, mostly because designs of aircrafts don't really change much. Maybe a bit of a thing on the engine here and a bit of a thing on the tail there or the fuselage, but it's something that's kind of similar throughout the year. Throughout the years, but for me, I wanted a new experience. So I'm flying a new route today. I'm visiting a new country today, and I was like, okay, so that's how I ended up switching to piloting now. And so I switched to piloting only to get to Hungary and hear that I have to do piloting and engineering. So it was like I would have fun on some days and I would actually hate my life on other days. But yeah, so that was an interesting thing because a lot of the flight schools here in Kenya only give you an option to do the flight training. Not many of them offer the integrated program where you get to do a degree as well. It's quite popular in Europe. Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of it in the US as well. Most of the times it's that European flight schools offer that type of experience. And so yeah, I had a bit of an interesting experience because of my health now being a factor, because aviation really takes health conditions very seriously because certain conditions need to be mitigated because they can become a hazard in flight. And so I ended on the wrong side of yeah, so I had to handle that, and I really learned to prioritize my health. I really learned to take care of myself. I would find myself in situations and be like, no, I'm a student pilot, I have no business ingesting that, like so my academic experience really it helped me learn how to take care of my health and mental health as well, because mental health is very important in aviation. So that was something that I'm grateful I got to take in and remove myself from situations when I feel like they would become too overwhelming or too overstimulating, just because I understand that in the long term this could have a negative impact on me. And so uni was quite fun. Uni was quite fun because our uni would organize events, and they would encourage us to get to know each other as international students, and they would try to integrate us with the Hungarian community as well. So that was quite fun, and they had the study abroad opportunities where you would go to other countries as well. So I was like, oh, this is quite nice, because I feel like uni here in Kenya is just go to school, come back home, do your assignments, do a cards, you get. But uni was actually pretty easier in Hungary because they knew international students are coming to Europe for fun. So it wasn't really hell bent on like really difficult stuff. So we would have a theory class and a practice class. So a theory where we go and we take in the information, and a practice class where they teach us how to apply that information, which I found really, 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 really nice, because we didn't really have that here in Kenya. We got to build our own timetables and schedules, so you get to understand, am I a morning person? Do I want to be at school in the morning? Do I want to be taking classes in the evening? Do I want to do my exams early, or do I want to take the time to like revise? So you really have to study yourself so that you see how well you fit into the system in a way that your academic experience is not going to be like too harsh or too draining for you. So I really got to understand myself a lot, a lot. And I also got to build hobbies. That's when I started filming and doing like content and photography and DJing as well. So yeah, and my interest in finance also stemmed from that, because I wasn't finding my engineering fulfilling, and I used to ask myself, okay, I don't like this, but what do I like? So I figured out that I really like finance, and I got into investment banking and asset management, and I was doing private portfolio management in my last year. Yeah, up until now in Kenya, and I still am doing it, and it's really, really nice. So it helped me really sit with myself and ask myself, what do I like? How can I make my academic experience better for myself? And I also learned to trust myself and express myself a lot more, even up to the point where I was talking to my school and I was telling them, like, I really feel like this is a good opportunity, but my health is not coping well and I need to take a break. And I understand that these are going to be the consequences, because if you're outside the country for, if you take a break past a certain limit, then you can't get like funding from university anymore. But it was more of me understanding that my health is not a negotiable factor, and I do understand that, and I get that this is a really good opportunity, but I feel like this having played out the way that it has, I will get something better in the end, and I will still be able to get back on my feet, and I'll be able to live out what I really wanted to do. So that was basically my uni experience. Quite fun, quite social. I had my academic moments and my social moments as well. And I actually realized I have dyslexia, because I used to go to school and I would wonder why I have such a hard time listening to my instructor. But when I would go home, I would go through the information. When I would read it out to myself out loud, I'd go through the information so seamlessly and be like, actually, this is not that easy. But if I just go to class and I'm listening to him and I'm answering a question here and there and I'm making notes, 2 weeks down the line, I have no recollection of whatever I was doing in class. Like, I have no memory of it. Like, an accurate memory enough to like do an exam. You get? But if I go home and I read it out loud to myself and I speak it out, I remember it for a very long time. So yeah, so thanks to that, when I was picking my flight school and my new flight academy, I was telling them that I actually prefer 80% self study and 15% consultation, because that way I can easily go through information way faster, and it's an easier learning experience for me. I'm not overwhelmed, I'm not frustrating, I'm not questioning my intelligence, because that's what I was doing for the past 2 years. I was really asking myself, like, am I really meant for this course? Because whole time I thought that I wasn't meant to be in those rooms, like maybe I made a mistake. But at the end of the day, I just realized that it's just the learning style that doesn't really suit me, because we used to go to school 8 to 5, 8 to 5, 8 to 5. So it was just a bit much, because I prefer to go through information really quick in 2 hours, and I have the remaining day to myself to do, other stuff. So a schedule that gives me a lot of flexibility in terms of teaching myself and internalizing information, and then I get to consult on what I didn't understand, is what I was able to use as a factor while choosing my new flight school and flight academy. And so now going into the differences between flight schools in Hungary or in Europe and flight schools in Kenya, because my friend is studying here in Kenya, and now we were having conversations about it. And I think the thing that shocked me was the exams, because for pilots we have to do exams, and in Hungary we used to get only 3 chances to do the exam. If you fail the third attempt, then you have to start the whole flight training again. So you go back to like first year again. But in Kenya they have 10 chances. you have 10 chances to take the test. So I feel like you are given more room here. And then the other thing about flight schools, there was our exams, you could see the question, and as soon as you pick an answer for the question and you press next, then you never see that question again. So you have to be really sure, and we never had wrong answers. They were all right, so you have to pick the best one. So you have to be really, really accurate. Not all questions, of course, but like that was the way they structured the system. Like, so you can find two answers that are really, really close. But here in Kenya, you can even sit, and our sittings in Hungary were 6 hours long only. So you can only be in the exam room for 6 hours. But here in Kenya, you can have the whole day with the questions. You can revisit questions if you feel like you aren't sure about what you put on, what answers you selected, that type of vibe. So I feel like there's more room for error here as opposed to there. And so you really feel like, even though, because there's people who have failed after the seventh time and then they finally passed and they were able to get on, move on, and become and move into the working space. So I think that was something that was very important, because I always felt so anxious sometimes when I'd go for my exams, because I'd be like, oh my days, like my life actually depends on it, but in the real sense it really doesn't. Like, you know what I mean? So understanding that. And then even in our flight training as well, for our solo flights, the solo flight is the one that you do. You When you start your flight training, they train you and you fly with an instructor, and then it gets to a point where you can actually fly alone. So that's your solo flight. You're the pilot in command, so you're in control. You get to simulate a failure and handle it. Like, in case the engine fails, what are you gonna do? So you're the one making decisions in the cockpit. So in Hungary, we had 3 chances as well to pass your solo flight. So if by any chance you were not able to land safely, or you missed a particular thing on the checklist even on your third attempt, then you would have to be removed from the piloting program. So you'd have to study something else, like engineering or whatever. But here in Kenya, they really work with you to understand, okay, what parts are you really struggling with? Okay, you haven't passed your solo. There's no certain number of attempts that you have. It's more of, okay, you weren't able to pass it this time, so what exactly was the problem? They try to have you redo the classes. They give you a different instructor to see if you can be able to understand, like, from a different perspective. So I felt like the flight training here really, really tries to meet the student at their point of need, and create like a learning experience in a way that you learn to trust yourself, and you learn to, you know, really fly an aircraft confidently. Because I saw my seniors in Hungary who would finish and they weren't really confident, because the whole time they were just ticking off to things on their boxes, and it wasn't really, this is going to be a lifelong career. How can I have, because you were constantly being rushed. Okay, you need to have done your solo right now. You need to have done your exams by now. You only have this number of attempts. If you haven't, there was a lot of pressure, and so here in Kenya, it's more of an easygoing learning experience, and they really, 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 really do their best to help you be more confident if it's confident you're lacking, or see how they can switch a few things here and there to make you a success in terms of what you want to achieve. And so after realizing that, I was like, wait, I thought all flight schools are this strict. I thought all flight schools are like this. I thought all flight schools are this and that. And then at my flight school, we used to do theory and flying together. So you have your theory, you have your exams, and you also have flights, and it would be a bit too much considering you have engineering as well. So it was like, our schedule was like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you have engineering, and then Thursday, Friday, you go to the flight school. And then you have flights as well, you have your exams. So this is how the piloting exams are structured. You do have classes, and you do have like midterms and a final exam, but then you also have the exam that you go and do at the examination center as well. So basically, this was a lot on our plate, but in flight schools here, they understand that that's going to be a bit overbearing for the students. So you do your theory first, and then you're just flying after. So it just makes the experience a bit less overwhelming, because I feel like the way they structure it in Europe is if you've been passionate about piloting your whole life and you know everything about it, you would be able to go through that particular system. But if it's something that you're slowly transitioning into, it can be overwhelming because you're like, this is not what I signed up for. Like, I was just here to fly aircraft. Why are they giving me like 1,000,001 rules that I need to, adhere to? So there's just about the differences, and I feel like they were very key in picking a flight school because I realized that I prefer an easygoing learning experience and I easily get anxious. So I really prefer when my instructor or when the school really tries to listen to my preferences and understand how they can help meet them in a way that I get to have a lovely learning experience. Because as much as I do want to get my licenses right now, I want to have like a lovely process. Like, I don't want to be traumatized for life and to a point where I'm just like, I never want to go to school again. I never want to, but I want it to be like, okay, this is something that I want to keep on learning. Like, anytime they introduce a new aircraft, I want to learn more about it. You get what I mean? So that is a bit of what piloting was like and the differences in the systems.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's very interesting, honestly. The thing you talked about on
Mhm.
Hungary or like European flight schools, they expect you to have had prior knowledge essentially
Yeah.
before you get
Yeah.
into like flight school. And for Kenya, they no, okay, they're going to start with you from scratch and like walk with
Yeah.
you through the journey. And I feel like that was also the same in high school, where
Mhm.
like when you got into high school, say from one, like we start from scratch, we start with integers in math, we start with the basics in English, and like we walk with a person. I was talking about this with someone else I had in the podcast, and she was saying like when you get into high school, like we should not start with the integers. Like integers should not be something that we're learning in high school. But now I'm seeing the necessity because like now we're transitioning into a new phase and you have to adapt to the environment and stuff like that. But like how do we, because again we have to consider time, we have to consider like learning advanced stuff because now I guess for high school, for example, it's sort of detrimental to someone like myself when it comes to the US, which is also the same case as Europe, where I feel like you're in an added advantage if you learned something prior to coming to university. Yeah, so how do we draw the line? I mean, because again, there are people who like would love to like go the easy route. I would love to go the easy route. I don't like working under pressure. And like I would love now to like be taken step by step. Like my instructor should understand what my learning process. And there's this
Yeah.
other side where like if you have prior knowledge, like someone wants to go fast and like finish in school. So how do we draw the line? How do we balance the two?
For aviation particularly, flight schools need to take that into consideration when they're taking in applicants, for example, because that way because they understand the systems that they have, they know the types of instructors that they have, they know the learning environment that they've created for themselves. Because, for example, my flight school was more of, if you can't take the pressure, hit the door, that type of vibe. And I feel like understanding that that is what their expectation is, then how the conversation of what is an ideal learning experience for you needs to be among the things discussed in the interview, because I feel like that's a very important conversation to be had even in schools in Kenya, because you get to realize how certain students were really struggling in high school, not because they were dumb, but because the way the system was set up didn't really cater to themselves. Because for me personally, I feel like I could have gone without self expression for 4 years and still done what was required of me. But there's students that couldn't. And they needed to express themselves and they needed to read other things outside the books that we were meant to read. They loved novels, like they loved going for the funkies and like the school events. Like, they preferred a more um extracurricular centered type of learning.
You really mentioned things like academic pressure and stuff like that, and you also talked about journaling. And I'm wondering like how were you able to like keep yourself grounded during like those pressureful times?
Okay, that really um changed over the years. I think in the beginning, because you're all struggling, friends, conversations together, those really work because you're encouraging each other and you're just saying, okay, I also struggled with that, but this is what I did for it. I also struggled with that, and this is what I did for it. So first year, that works pretty well. And then first year friendships and social circles worked well. And then comes second year where people are starting to like take different paths and specialize into different things. So we don't really have that much time for each other anymore. So second year, I think I started to have a more balanced academic experience because I knew that, okay, I can handle the pressure if I de-stress one way or another. That's when I started DJing. That's when I fell in love with music. So it was more of, okay, I feel overwhelmed. I'm just gonna, listen to some music, create a mix here and there. And then once I feel a bit more calm, then I can revisit the material and have like fresh perspective now and be able to like take it in. So I'm also taking healthy breaks and finding hobbies that really helped me reaffirm myself that I'm actually good at something. Like I can actually teach myself something. I can actually learn something, be an amateur and get better because that way I know that okay, even if I'm struggling with this particular concept, it's just because I'm not familiar with it and I will be better. Do you get what I mean? And then come third year was more of me understanding what I actually want my career experience to look like and how the the steps that I'm taking now are going to be either pushing me towards that or pushing me away from that. So when I was picking my courses, I would pick courses in business as well. I would pick courses in design as well. So it was more of understanding that, okay, sometimes I'm struggling with this, but when I pair it with this and that, it's going to take me closer towards becoming a pilot who, for example, has specialized in aircraft software. One other important thing to mention was Hungary was a bit toxic because um, what this piloting program was marketed to international students, but the qualifications. No. The certificates and licenses that you complete the program with were suitable for the European job market alone. So if you would come back to Kenya, you'd have to rejoin flight school in order to be able to use your licenses because what we finished was at a lower level than the requirements that the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority needs. And even though it's just a small gap, it's going to cost you about like 1.5 million Kenya shillings to get to rejoin to rejoin a flight school here and fly the remaining hours and whatever. So I would sit down and ask myself, why would you call Kenyans, call Ugandans, like call people from all around the world to come and study a course and you know that the European job market doesn't really hire international pilots because aviation is something that they've reserved for European citizens and permanent residents. So you understand that, but yet you give me the qualifications that match this job market despite knowing that I could never work here unless I was a citizen or a permanent resident, which you're not able to achieve within the 3 year time frame. So I feel like looking at a flight school and telling them that this are my requirements, like these are the requirements for my country in case I would like to go back and work there. So that long term, like understanding what I want to do with my licenses long term and having that conversation with the flight school. And I feel like that also gives me a certain level of confidence and certainty when I'm going to a school because I'm not gonna, at no point in my journey will I sit back and be like, oh, I'm really grinding and I'm not going to use this. No, I know exactly how I want to use this and I know how this particular environment is pushing me towards that.
All right, and you talked about the quote, seducing your inner critique. You said you're going to read it out loud, so.
Yeah. So peak eroticism is becoming the aphrodisiac that seduces your inner critique. And and it's about reaching a state where you charm, disarm, and win over your own inner judge, the voice inside you that doubts, criticizes, or holds you back. And when you can seduce your own inner critique, calm it, satisfy it, and win its approval, you radiate a kind of unstoppable, self-assured magnetism outwardly. And so it's really important, especially if you're someone who like overthinks or overanalyzes, or like you're constantly reflecting on something. Your brain can become a powerful tool and also a tool that can destroy as well because it's easy to wallow in situations in which they played out better or find yourself really doubting yourself, doubting how prepared you are for an exam, or doubting, especially for aviation, considering now the pressure that we had, like with the three chances, sometimes I remember I would panic on sometimes and call my instructor and tell him like, hi, at 4 a.m. in the morning and I have like a 7 a.m. flight. I'm telling him like, hi, I'm preparing for my flight, but I don't really feel confident enough. And I think I'm gonna want to sit this one out and you can give the flight slot to someone else. Do you get that was me falling victim of my own inner critique, because seducing my own inner critique would be like, okay, I don't feel confident in my preparation, but what can I do now? Like, how much can I prepare now? And can I reach out to my instructor and tell him that this is what I can prepare now? And maybe we can have an extra longer briefing, because before every flight, we need to have a 1 hour briefing so that he can see that you're prepared for the flight that you're about to do. So if I could request for him to meet me an hour earlier so he could work through the preparation with me, then I would be able to be a bit prepared. Yeah, so that's the quote.
All right, and I feel like that ties a lot to the inner voice, like the inner voice in our heads. People talk about how, like, for you to have this transformation, you should start inwardly. And,
Yeah,
that voice inside our heads, like, we should all be like our best friends. Like, your first best friend should be yourself. Yeah, and I'm wondering, how have you been able to create maybe that relationship with yourself? And how have you affirmed yourself throughout your journey? Piloting, it's not an easy task, it's not an easy course. And even through high school, because again, I feel like high school was also very rigorous, and then shifting from that to piloting, and right now, your transition to another school.
I think one of my friends, okay, we're not really close anymore, but she was the one who initiated some level of healthy self reflection that made me fall in love with myself and my ability to become a pilot again. Because she would ask me, every time when you feel yourself getting anxious and you're panicking, ask yourself, why am I allowing myself to feel like this? Why am I allowing this emotion to consume me? Why am I allowing myself to feel very fearful and to feel like I'm incapable, or to feel like things are not gonna work out? You know, and I started to ask myself that. Even sometimes when I would find myself in situations that I don't want to be in, I would ask myself, like, why am I allowing myself to feel this level of distress? Why am I allowing myself to feel this level of overwhelm? And when you ask yourself why, you're able to sit down and maybe you realize, maybe I said yes to something I didn't want to do. And so it's more of understanding, how can I create a boundary where I'm not in this particular situation anymore. Maybe I'm anxious because I only spent half an hour preparing when I could have spent a whole day. I could have set aside a whole day to prepare. So it's more of understanding, like, how am I playing a role in this, and why am I allowing myself to struggle with something emotionally, particularly emotionally, or even when you're negatively talking, when you're talking down on yourself, like, you're asking yourself, why am I allowing myself to speak to myself like that? Why is that such a norm to me? Why can't I speak to myself with love? Like, why, sitting and reflecting and understanding where these habits are coming from. Because maybe you are in an environment where no one ever motivated you, or the norm was to speak negatively in an aim to build. Because I feel like sometimes Kenyan high schools had that toxic trait, of saying, you're never gonna go anywhere if you act like that. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, so I need to act right. And so you find yourself talking to yourself like that as well. And now it hurts because it comes from you, and it's easy for it to have a negative impact, because it's like, sometimes you're already down, you're already having a hard time, and then you get a negative comment, and it's just overwhelming for you, and it makes you spiral into, maybe you pick up a negative habit, and now that negative habit makes you feel bad about yourself, and now it's like you're on a feedback loop from hell. I've learned that as much as I really love to like journal about like my day and like the things that I'm grateful for. So sometimes I just want to journal about a particular thing that it's that is at the top of my head at the particular moment, or something that I'm really struggling to understand, and I'm gonna just like write about, because I feel like it's easy for me to, because I'm such a on the whim type of person. I don't think I want to journal about the same thing every day. Like, I'm not going to be journaling about, oh, today I did this and this and that. It's more of, okay, today these are the things that have been weighing heavily on me, or that have been on my mind, and maybe they're on my mind because I need to make a decision on them, or maybe they're on my mind because I haven't fully allowed myself to heal from something, and it's holding me back from what I meant to do now. And so sitting with myself and thinking through and understanding, okay, so this and this is the situation, how can I make it better for myself?
I'll ask you the last question, which is, what is your vision? Like, if you think about quality education, what does that look like?
When I think about quality education, I feel like it's something I really think about, because I think about my kids, and I think about what would be the most ideal learning environment that I would want, because I would give them the best, and the best would be now my version of what the what ideal, like what quality education would look like. And I think the first few years, I think homeschooling is a bit important, because it gets to give a child some level of grounding. Because I feel like I have my values, and I have like things that I think are very important in life, and I carry myself in that regard. And so I feel like homeschooling builds a lot of confidence in children from a very young age, because they're able to sit with the teacher and say that I didn't understand this. Like, could you explain this for me? Like, could you explain this to me? I mean, you know, and also instill healthy values in the children, because you're able to regulate the environment with which they are studying from, and so they're able to see, okay, yes, mom is hardworking in this and this particular way. Whenever she says she's gonna do something, she does it. So when I say I need to do my assignment, I know I need to do it. So I think homeschooling at the very beginning is important, because it helps instill like values in the kids, and it creates a healthy foundation for them to now be able to make decisions confidently when I'm not there, you know? And so now blending that into learning with other people, like a smooth transition, not like all of a sudden like you're in a class with so many other people, but creating a smooth transition where there's like a bit of homeschooling and then a bit of in-class learning, where they now get to interact with other people, and because they have values, they know how to talk to people respectfully, so there's no bullying, like, because they have values, they're able to say that I don't like how your words are making me feel, and I do, like encouraging that level of self-expression, because I feel like in the early stages you're not really in charge of what your students get to learn. And so homeschooling will help me instill the need for self-expression and encourage that, so by the time they're going into the classroom with other students, they understand that even though everyone seems to have understood, I owe it to myself to raise my hand and say that I'm sorry, I didn't get what you were explaining to get. So cultivating the self-expression, which is going to create a better learning experience for them when now they're around people. And so the social comes in, and encouraging hobbies, whichever at whatever stage they want. Today maybe you like cameras, we go all out, get your camera, you get to play with it. Tomorrow maybe you want to ride horses. So understanding or a learning environment that allows for holistic development, I think, is quality education.
All right, Michelle, thank you so much for being this Face Plus podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.